Watchman on the pod. I really hope Dakota be quiet, but we'll see. We don't know. Okay, code word Barbelon 666. Danger in the Vatican, Book 1. The Sons of Laloya and Their Plans for World Domination by P.D. Stuart. We are in chapter 25. Ruling through the Bavarian Illuminati. The general will know how to shape at will not only the army he is commanding, but also that of his enemies. Sun Tzu, The Art of War. It is the 18th century, and the Jesuits have launched a massive salvo, their most audacious campaign yet for world domination. May 1st, 1776, a high satanic holiday, was the beginning of a new phase for the Roman Catholic Church, a phase that would have reverberations around the world for decades to come. On that date, a German Jesuit by the name of Dr. Adam Weishaupt founded a secret revolutionary society called the Illumination Ordines, or Order of the Illuminati, based at the Jesuit University of Ingolstadt, Bavaria, and patterned after the model of the Jesuit order. Weishaupt adopted the code name Spartacus after a slave who led an uprising against the Roman legions. Prior to their suppression in 1773, the degree of power that the members of the Society of Jesus had attained in the German state of Bavaria was almost absolute. It was by them that the majority of the Bavarian colleges were founded, and it was by them that they were controlled. And so it is not surprising that they would use their most renowned university to launch their comeback. It is a fact that even before the Pope canonically restored the Jesuits in 1814, the Society of Jesus had already been scheming a return to power. As indicated above, the date of the Illuminati's launch appears to have occult significance, as May 1st is the satanic holy Sabbath called Beltane, one of the most important nights on the satanic calendar, when a human sacrifice is required in mockery of the death of Jesus Christ. The founder of the Illuminati was born the son of a Jewish rabbi on February 6, 1748. He was made to convert to Catholicism in 1753, the year his father died, when he was adopted by his godfather, Baron Johann Adam von Eichstätt, a director at the Jesuit University of Ingolstadt. The young orphan's education was thereafter entrusted to the care of the Jesuits of that great university. Of a brilliant mind and being well trained in the Jesuit arts of evocation and probabilism, Weishaupt, at the age of just 25, was promoted to the prestigious position of professor of canon law. As the favored protege of von Eichstätt, he would later become professor of moral theology at Ingolstadt, which university had a long tradition in that dangerous and pernicious subject. The reader will notice that I have referred to Weishaupt as a Jesuit rather than an ex-Jesuit, which is how most historians and commentators label him. That, of course, has long been the accepted view. But in this chapter, I would like to proffer an alternative perspective, one that will explain a lot of what has mystified the historians and commentators alike. I wish to propose a radically different hypothesis altogether, which is simply this, that Weishaupt, for all his public attacks on the Jesuits, never left the order. In fact, Weishaupt was merely a talisman. I say Weishaupt remained a Jesuit for the following co-regent reasons. Firstly, the term ex-Jesuit is misleading, as all Jesuits after 1773 were called ex-Jesuits, since no Jesuit was allowed to openly act as such following the decree of suppression. At the time Weishaupt revived the Illuminati, the Jesuits had only recently been banned from teaching, and all their colleges were taken over under the famous bull or bereave of Pope Clement XIV. Even in Germany, where the Jesuits were for a time permitted to teach, they were only allowed to do so as subordinates and not as superiors. Weishaupt, in order to retain his professorship at Ingolstadt, declared himself as having left the Jesuits, even claiming to be their enemy. Because of the terms of Pope Clement's bill, had Weishaupt not disowned his allegiance to the Jesuits, he would not have been able to retain his professorship at Ingolstadt. Now, the official yawn given about this is that the Jesuits were sorely offended with Weishaupt following his appointment as professor of civil law at Ingolstadt in 1772, before they were even suppressed, and more so by his latter appointment as professor of canon law in 1773, the year the Jesuit order had been banned. Incredibly, it is said that for these trifling reasons, he got into a quarrel with the Jesuits and thereafter left the order, renouncing his oath and vows and thus becoming their bitterest enemy, as Professor Robinson declares. However, notwithstanding my indebtedness to and respect for the research of Professor Robinson, his analysis on this one point is, in my opinion, much too simple and does not reconcile with the facts. That Weishaupt, who every credible historian admits was not only educated as a Jesuit priest, but actually founded his Illuminati order after the heretical model of the Society of Jesus, i.e., their constitutions, would then become their bitterest enemy simply on account of some fallout over his professorship at Ingolstadt seems to be too quite ludicrous. Had Weishaupt really hated the Jesuits that much, he would not have used their constitutions, which are the essence of Jesuitism. Additionally, we know that Weishaupt entered into an intrigue with the Jesuit professor Statler to obtain a coveted ecclesiastical position for the latter. Further, Weishaupt did not leave the Jesuit order, as the order did not officially exist. It had already been banned in 1773, and the Jesuit general was in prison, resulting in a sharp setback to their policies. So there was nothing to leave as such. In any event, one would have thought that the appointment of one of their brethren should have been a cause for rejoicing that a member of their order was still allowed to teach, at a time when the order itself was officially banned from doing so. Moreover, the Catholic Online Encyclopedia confirms that even after the order, the Society of Jesus, was suppressed, some of the ex-Jesuits retained their professorship for a long while. Yet we are not told that any of these other ex-Jesuits got into quarrels with their former order or became the enemies of the society. Thus, the idea of them being angry at Weishaupt for continuing as a professor at Ingolstadt, resulting in bitterness between them and him, is just too simplistic and incredulous to my mind. In fact, Ingolstadt was founded by Peter de Hont, Peter Canonisus, 1521 to 1597, the first German Jesuit. And the Jesuits had held virtually all professorship at Ingolstadt for over 90 years. Indeed, in 1688, the teaching in the Faculty of Philosophy at Ingolstadt passed entirely into the hands of the Jesuit professors. Weishaupt was first made a professor there in 1772, before the Jesuits were banned in 1773. Thus, there was no reason whatsoever for any ill feelings over Weishaupt's appointment, since Ingolstadt had not only been a Jesuit stronghold, but also Weishaupt was already professor at that institution in 1772. Even more ridiculous is the proposition that merely on account of this petty and puerile quarrel, which claim we have already debunked, and for no other reason, Weishaupt not only came to hate the Jesuits, but more, he now sought, for no apparent reason, to destroy his own church. How could Weishaupt even imagine that with a few friends, if the official story is to be believed, he could possibly overturn the mighty Catholic Church? We must also ask why a well-to-do professor with everything going for him, apart from his alleged fallout with the Jesuits, would not only attack the Jesuits, but would stubbornly turn against his church and also against the whole world, devising a plan to overturn all governments and establishments. Only a deranged individual would dream up such a grand and vengeful plan for no greater reason than a dispute with his former brethren over an appointment as a professor at Ingolstadt University. On the contrary, the very fact that he now hated his church is consistent with him remaining a member of an underground Jesuit movement rather than their enemy, as the Jesuits had every reason to hate and revenge the Catholic Church, having been so shamefully disbanded and suppressed in 1773 by the decree of Pope Clement XIV. Next, we must consider that despite his brilliance at the time he founded the Illuminati, Weishaupt was just 28 years old. Now, the intelligent reader will at once appreciate that Weishaupt, although a professor of law, could hardly have been the supremo behind this powerful order, as so many historians have naively suggested. Another curious fact is that on February 15th, 1775, Cardinal Braschi was elected Pope Pius VI. This Pius was a former pupil of the Jesuits, and he desired the release of Father Ricci, the Jesuit general, and his fellow Jesuits from the prison in Castel San Angelo. But Charles III of Spain insisted on their detention. Weishaupt's order was formed on May 1st, 1776, a little over a year after Charles's refusal. We must also ask, if Weishaupt was so anti-pope and hated the Catholic Church that much, why was it that when Weishaupt was at last laid to rest, he was given a full Catholic burial? For all his purported plans to bring about the destruction of the Catholic Church and the public condemnation of his order by Pope Pius VI, Weishaupt was never excommunicated from the Catholic Church. In fact, on the contrary, at his death on November 18th, 1830, the Catholic Church proudly claimed Weishaupt her faithful son, saying that he had been reconciled with the Catholic Church, which, as a youthful professor, he had doomed to death and destruction. This late life reconciliation to the Catholic Church and the lack of any steps taken to excommunicate a man whose alleged lifelong mission was the destruction of the Catholic Church speaks for itself. It is even admitted that Weishaupt, before his death, became a zealous supporter of and helped build up the Catholic Church in Gotha. So says the Chronicle of the Catholic Parish in Gotha, Germany. Weishaupt served his church well. See, reader, how ludicrous the whole matter appears when analyzed but a little. Indeed, the Catholic Encyclopedia, under the heading Illuminati, makes this fascinating admission. For his prototype, he, Weishaupt, relied mainly on Freemasonry, in accordance with which he modeled the degrees and ceremonial rites of his order, after the pattern of the Society of Jesus. Though distorting to the point of caricature its essential features, he built up the strictly hierarchical organization of his society to hide its essential Jesuit nature, no doubt. In other words, when the Jesuit imago was suppressed in 1773, the Illuminati order became the chrysalis for a new, more virulent form of Jesuitism, the pseudo-metamorphosis. That's a long word, you guys. Pseudo-metamorphosis. But perhaps the strongest proof that Weishaupt was a Jesuit throughout the suppression comes from his main collaborator and closest associate, the influential Freemason and lawyer Baron Nig Filio, who on April 20th, 1784, resigned from the Illuminati, convinced of Weishaupt's Jesuitism, accusing him of being a Jesuit in disguise. Indeed, Weishaupt once wrote, "Behold our secret, the end justifies the mean." Yep. And no marvel, for the Jesuits also have as their first and greatest motto, the end justifies the means. One of their most diabolical maxims. Tupper Saucy, in his work Rulers of Evil, also expresses the view that the founder of the Illuminati, Adam Weishaupt, was under orders from the Jesuit general Lorenzo Ricci. The author of that book does not give the same reasons I have, yet it was encouraging to see that someone else had decided to think for themselves and not simply accept the official mantra on so important a historical development. reform of an older order. Another little considered fact is that at the time when Loyola established the Jesuits, there already existed a sect called the Alumbrados, the Enlightened or Illuminated, which was a secret mystic movement in Spain during the 16th and 17th centuries. And as we read earlier, Loyola was put in jail for being a member of the Spanish Illuminati, the Alumbrados. Ignatius was suspected of being a member of the Illuminati and was thrown into prison by the Inquisition. Upon his release, he made his way to Salamanca, the great university, and being suspected of Illuminism, was again thrown into prison. Thus, contrary to accepted opinion, the Illuminati did not begin with Adam Weishaupt, but had always been a major influence in Jesuitism from the time the Society of Jesus was founded by Loyola. In fact, Leopold Engel says that Weishaupt was the head of the revived order of the Illuminati. Indeed, Weishaupt himself originally claimed that the Illuminati originated from the Zoroastrian religion of the last king of Persia, Zadizigurd III, 632 to 651 BC. Catholic priest Father John Hogan is even more conclusive. He writes, the Jesuits are well known as reforms of older orders. And the Jesuit priest Malachi Martin said the same thing. We quote again the observation of Schauster. It is a strange phenomenon in the history of the Roman Church that every time there is a crisis of extraordinary value, new Masonic orders are called forth. And that is how the Jesuit became into being. Emphasis supplied, is that the crisis which called forth the Jesuit order, as we have already discovered, was the Reformation started by the general monk, Martin Luther. If we look at the Illuminati, we will see a direct semblance between Jesuitism and Luminism. No marvel, for as we saw, Weishaupt based his order on the constitutions of the Jesuits. Thus, it is impossible to resist the conviction that Weishaupt simply disavowed and distanced himself from the Jesuits after 1773 to keep his professorship while remaining a Jesuit, and so he was able to more effectively work for the revival of his order. Significantly, Weishaupt himself appears to confirm this. He wrote, I have the art to draw advantage even from misfortune, and when you would think me sunk to the bottom, I shall rise with new vigor. Who would have thought that a professor at Ingolstadt was to become the teacher of the professors of Göttingen and of the greatest men in Germany? What misfortune was he referring to? And what did he mean by sunk to the bottom? From what did he rise with new vigor? These words were written before Weishaupt's Illuminati order was banned from Bavaria, and so he could only have been referring to the fall of the Jesuits and their disgraceful expulsion from most of Europe. It was from this misfortune which he, as an ex-Jesuit, shared, sunk, and it was from the fall that he was plotting to rise with new vigor. Weishaupt's other statements also seem to confer our conclusion. He wrote to Cato in his letter, in another situation and in an active station in life, I should have been keenly occupied, and the founding of an order would have never come into my head. So from his own pen, we learn that the founding of the Illuminati was due not to his having fallen out with the Jesuits, but rather, in his own words, he was no longer in another situation. Weishaupt makes no mention of his alleged fallout with the Jesuits as the reason for his actions. But the clincher comes from another of Weishaupt's statement, with which Professor Robinson records, but seemed not to have fully grasped. I reproduced here in part the statement of Professor Robinson for the purpose of showing this real and logical connection between Weishaupt's Illuminati and the Jesuits. Robinson writes in chapter 2 of his book, Proofs of a Conspiracy. Weishaupt had long been scheming the establishment of an association or order, which in time should govern the world. He hinted to several ex-Jesuits the probability of their recovering under a new name, the influence which they formerly possessed, i.e., prior to their suppression in 1773. Does that sound like someone who was a bitter enemy of the Jesuits? Why would an enemy of the Jesuits hint to several ex-Jesuits the probability of the recovering under a new name? This, as I have said before, is the smoking gun. Historian Edward Duller writes, this constituted the Illuminati were, in some measure, a revivification of the Jesuits, although under the perverted use of the Freemason formula. My proposition, therefore, must now be obvious, that when Pope Clement XIV suppressed the Order of Loyola, aka the Jesuits, in 1773, Lorenzo Ricci, the Jesuit general, shrewdly reconstituted his order by using Adam Weishaupt to form the Illuminati. Weishaupt was merely the nominal founder and played a subordinate, though conspicuous, role in the organization of the sect. In short, Weishaupt entered into an intrigue with the Jesuits, and within 13 short years, his new Jesuit Freemasonry, which he termed Illuminati, had spread throughout all of Europe like the plague. Thus, even at the time when they were supposed to have been suppressed, the Jesuits continued under a different guise, a new name, and Weishaupt was still able to maintain an invisible league with his banned order. So confident was General Ricci of the indestructibility of the Society of Jesus that in 1764, before the suppression of his order, when asked by the King of France to modify the constitutions of the Jesuits, he replied, "Let them be as they are, or else not be." For despite the 1773 brief bull of Clement XIV, the Society of Jesus' corporate existence was officially maintained in Perugia, which is Germany, Poland, and Russia by the new monarchs. In 1770, a year after the Spanish ban on the Jesuits and 3 years before Pope Clement XIV issued his decree, Frederick II of Perugia, before he was the Great, wrote to the Jesuit-trained Voltaire, the famous French philosopher, "I shall hoard the precious seed, the remnants of the Jesuits, in order to redistribute it one day to those who may wish to cultivate this rare plant in their own land." Wow. Frederick did not merely hoard the precious seed. He took the vipers in his bosom using Freemasonry. We are told about the time that the Order of Loyola was suppressed. These intriguing brethren... Well, I'm at the last paragraph. Shh. Dakota, come here. We are told about the time that the Order of Loyola was suppressed. These intriguing brethren had attempted to maintain their influence by the help of Freemasons. Dakota! They're not going to hush because I think Richard's home. I am so sorry, you guys. What am I going to do? Go to the bathroom and read? Dakota, come here. It has also been suggested that the Jesuits, aided by Frederick II of Perugia, wrote the higher degrees of Scottish Rite Freemasonry. I am going to go to another room. Okay. I am so sorry, you guys. They can't help it. They're just dogs. They don't know better. They don't know any better. Yep, Richard's home. They love him so much. Okay, hold on. Like I said, I only got a few minutes here, so okay. Here we go. I am so sorry. Okay, here we go. We are told about the time that the Order of Loyola was suppressed. These intriguing brethren had attempted to maintain their influence by the help of Freemasonry. It has also been suggested that the Jesuits, aided by Frederick II of Perugia, wrote the higher degrees of Scottish Rite Freemasonry. To preserve the precious Jesuit seed, as he called them, Frederick next decreed, "We, Frederick, by the grace of God, King of Perugia, to each and every one of our loyal subjects, greetings. We have resolved that this recently executed destruction of the Society of Jesus shall not be promulgated in our states. We graciously command you to take within your jurisdictions the steps necessary to render null and void the said bull or brief of the Pope, and expressly forbid, on pain of stern punishment, to publish the said papal bull, you will be most vigilant in ensuring that this prohibition be obeyed. Some Masons today will deny that Frederick II had anything to do with the creating of the higher Masonic degrees, but such denials are so bald as to be baseless. Seeing that the Jesuits had such powerful allies on their side, the Pope, fearing the schismatic revenge of the Men in Black, made a complete right-about turn. In March 1774, the papal nuncio, Gerhard, announced that the Clement 14th, before his ultimately untimely death, had authorized the Jesuits of Poland and Perugia to continue teaching, preaching, and administering the sacraments of the Church. In any event, the execution of the brief of suppression, having been largely left to the local bishops, allowed plenty of wiggle room for a good amount of variety in the treatment the Jesuits might receive in different places. I will next offer proof to show that the awful result of the attempted suppression of the Jesuits in 1773 resulted in chaotic and fearful scenes of revolution, which, according to Lord Acton, the Catholic peer, was not by chance or due to popular frenzy, but by design and calculating organization. In other words, frightful Jesuitism. And that ends that. I so apologize for my dogs. They can't help it. They're just dogs. They don't know better. They just get so excited when they see a leaf blow or someone pull in the driveway because they're dogs. All right. So keep your eyes on Jesus, brothers and sisters. Your nose in the book, which is the Word of God. And embed the Word of God upon the tablets of your heart, my heart, so we will not sin against God or be deceived. Bye-bye.